The moment I picked up that pen, I knew I was either about to save myself or destroy everything I'd ever worked for. What I didn't know was that 3 federal agents were watching through hidden cameras, and the choice I was about to make would trigger a chain reaction that would explode in the middle of the biggest trial of my career. My hand hovered over the contract. Amanda watched me with that predatory smile I'd come to recognize. Agent Morrison stood by the window, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I looked down at the contract one more time. It was surprisingly detailed for a criminal conspiracy agreement. Fee structures, confidentiality clauses, dispute resolution procedures. Amanda had turned corruption into a business model. "Time's up, Victoria," Amanda said. "Sign or we make the call." I pressed the pen to paper. Started writing my name. Victoria. And then I stopped. "Actually," I said, setting down the pen, "I have a question first. Agent Morrison, when were you suspended from the FBI?" Morrison's expression flickered. Just for a second, but I caught it. "I don't know what you're talking about." 3 months ago. Suspended for undisclosed reasons. Reinstated 2 weeks ago, right before I won the Marcus Chin case. I stood up, facing both of them. "What I can't figure out is whether you're actually corrupt, or whether you're pretending to be corrupt to gather evidence against Amanda." The room went silent. Amanda's smile disappeared. Morrison's hand moved slightly toward her hip, where I assumed she carried a weapon. "That's a very dangerous accusation," Amanda said quietly. "It's not an accusation. It's an observation. Because if Morrison is really part of your network, why would she need a fake immunity agreement? You already have leverage over me with the bar exam fraud. The FBI paperwork is just theater." I walked to my desk drawer and pulled out a small device. It looked like a pen, but it was actually a recording device Jake had given me months ago for client interviews. "I've been recording this entire conversation. Every word you've said, Amanda. Every admission about your network, every instruction to throw cases, every threat. And if Morrison is really FBI, she already has everything she needs to arrest you." Amanda's calm facade cracked. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Because I noticed something interesting. When Morrison walked in this morning, she never actually showed me her badge. She held it up, but she never let me examine it closely. And the handcuffs she threatened me with? They're real FBI issue, which means either she's a real agent or she stole them from one." Morrison spoke for the first time in minutes. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Ms. Sterling." She reached into her jacket. Amanda tensed, clearly ready to run. But Morrison didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out her phone and pressed a button. "This is Special Agent Morrison. Subject has declined to sign agreement. Suspect Amanda Cross is in the office. Move in now." Within seconds, the door burst open. 4 FBI agents in tactical gear stormed in, weapons drawn. "Amanda Cross, you're under arrest for wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to obstruct justice." As agents handcuffed Amanda, Morrison turned to me. "For the record, that immunity agreement was real. Signed by the actual U.S. attorney. But you were right about one thing, I was suspended 3 months ago. Amanda's network had compromised one of my investigations. They released false information that made it look like I was taking bribes." "So you went undercover?" "Exactly. The suspension was cover for an internal investigation. We needed Amanda to think she'd successfully corrupted me, so she'd let her guard down. The video you saw of me meeting with David Kim? That was real, but it was part of building my cover. David thought he was recruiting a corrupt agent. He had no idea I was recording everything." As Amanda was let out in handcuffs, she looked at me one final time. "This isn't over, Victoria. I have contingency plans. People in my network you haven't even met. They'll come for you." The door closed behind her, and suddenly my office felt very empty. "What happens now?" I asked Morrison. "Now you testify. We've arrested 7 members of her network this morning, including David Kim. But we need witnesses who can connect Amanda to specific acts of corruption. Your testimony about her instructions to throw the Blackwood case could be crucial." "When's the trial?" "There won't be a trial. Amanda's looking at 147 federal charges. Her lawyers are already discussing a plea deal. But we need your cooperation to make sure it sticks." I nodded slowly, processing everything. "And the bar exam fraud? What happens with that?" Morrison handed me a document. "Full immunity, as promised. But Victoria, I need you to understand something. This investigation isn't over. We dismantled Amanda's network, but there are other networks out there. Other lawyers being compromised. Other cases being manipulated. The corruption in the legal system goes deeper than you know." 3 days later, I was back in court. The pharmaceutical case, Dr. Richard Blackwood's defense against wrongful death charges, was moving forward. Amanda's arrest hadn't changed the fact that I had a client who needed representation. But everything felt different now. Every time I looked at opposing counsel, I wondered if they were part of some network. Every time a judge made a questionable ruling, I questioned whether corruption was involved. The prosecution's case was strong. They had internal company documents showing Blackwood knew his pain medication was dangerously addictive. They had testimony from former employees who claimed he'd suppressed safety data. They had victims' families ready to testify about loved ones who died from overdoses. But as I reviewed the evidence in preparation for trial, I kept seeing the same patterns I'd noticed before. Certain documents had metadata inconsistencies. Key emails came from IP addresses that didn't match company records. Witness statements had been altered after the fact. Someone had manipulated evidence in this case too. But it wasn't Amanda, she was in federal custody. So who was it? I called Jake Morrison. Jake, I need you to analyze all the digital evidence in the Blackwood case. Look for the same patterns we found in Marcus Chen's case. He worked through the night. What he found was disturbing. Victoria, this evidence has been manipulated by the same algorithm Amanda used. Same encryption methods, same metadata manipulation, same IP routing techniques. Whoever set up Blackwood is using Amanda's playbook. But Amanda's in prison. Which means someone else has access to her tools. Either another member of her network, or she trained someone to carry on the operation even if she got caught. The Blackwood trial began on a Monday morning in November. The courthouse was packed with reporters, victims' families, and pharmaceutical industry observers. This was the trial everyone had been waiting for, a test of whether executives could be held personally accountable for the opioid crisis. Jury selection took 3 days. The prosecution wanted people who'd been personally affected by addiction. I needed jurors who could separate emotion from evidence. But something strange kept happening. Every juror I selected based on careful analysis would suddenly develop concerns during questioning. They'd mention fears about pharmaceutical companies, worries about being targeted by activists, or unexpected schedule conflicts. By the third day, I'd lost 7 potential jurors to mysterious last-minute concerns. Your Honor, I finally said, I'd like to request an investigation into potential jury tampering. Several potential jurors have withdrawn under suspicious circumstances. The prosecutor, a young assistant DA named Sarah Chen, objected immediately. Your Honor, Ms. Sterling is making unfounded accusations to delay the trial. Judge Patricia Williams, a no-nonsense veteran of the federal bench, considered my request. Ms. Sterling, do you have any evidence of tampering? Not direct evidence, Your Honor. But the statistical probability of 7 jurors independently developing concerns after being selected is negligible. I believe someone is interfering with this process. The judge ordered the jury pool sequestered while she investigated. And that's when things got interesting. That afternoon, I received an email from an untraceable account. The subject line was simple. Amanda sends her regards. Inside was a detailed explanation of how the jury tampering was being executed. Anonymous phone calls to selected jurors. Carefully worded threats about media exposure. Suggestions that their safety might be at risk if they served on this particular jury. The email also included recordings of these phone calls and IP addresses showing they originated from a location in Brooklyn. Why would someone send me evidence of jury tampering? I asked Agent Morrison when I forwarded her the email. Because they want you to win this case. Dr. Blackwood's conviction serves someone's interest. His acquittal serves someone else's. You're caught in the middle of a war between competing corruption networks. The realization hit me like a freight train. Amanda's network wasn't the only one. There were multiple criminal organizations manipulating the legal system, and they were fighting each other through court cases. So who sent me this email? Who wants Blackwood to be acquitted? That's what we need to find out. With a new jury finally seated, opening statements began. The prosecution painted Blackwood as a monster who deliberately created an addictive medication to maximize profits. They showed graphs of addiction rates, photos of victims, financial records showing bonuses tied to prescription volumes. When it was my turn, I took a different approach. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're going to hear a lot about Dr. Blackwood's wealth, about his company's profits, about the devastating impact of opioid addiction. And all of those facts are true. But facts without context can be misleading. I pulled up a presentation showing the manipulated evidence. What the prosecution hasn't told you is that key evidence in this case has been fabricated. Emails have been backdated. Financial records have been altered. Witness statements have been changed after the fact. Someone wants you to convict Dr. Blackwood, but not because he's guilty. Because his conviction serves their interests. The prosecutor objected furiously. The judge called for a sidebar. As we argued about the admissibility of my evidence tampering claims, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the gallery, sitting 3 rows back, was a face I recognized. David Kim. The man whose bar exam I'd taken. The man who'd supposedly been arrested as part of Amanda's network. But he was sitting there, free, watching the trial with a slight smile. After the sidebar, Judge Williams made a ruling. Ms. Sterling, your evidence tampering claims are serious. I'm ordering a recess while a forensic analysis is conducted on all digital evidence. Court will reconvene in 3 days. As the judge left the bench and the jury filed out, I approached Agent Morrison in the gallery. Why is David Kim free? I thought you arrested him. Morrison's expression darkened. He made a deal. Testified against Amanda in exchange for immunity. So the man who helped corrupt me, who participated in Amanda's network, gets to walk free? Welcome to the justice system, Ms. Sterling. Sometimes the small fish swim free so we can catch the big ones. But as I watched David Kim leave the courtroom, I realized something. He wasn't a small fish. He was something far more dangerous. That evening, I received another anonymous email. This one contained a video file. The video showed David Kim meeting with Amanda in prison. They were having a conversation through the glass partition, speaking carefully to avoid triggering monitoring alerts. The Blackwood case is proceeding as planned, David said. Sterling's making all the right moves. Amanda smiled. Good. When she wins his acquittal, the pharmaceutical lobby will owe us a significant debt. And Sterling will be too compromised to ever expose what really happened. What about the FBI investigation? Morrison thinks she won. She has no idea that my network was just the visible layer. The real operation goes much deeper. The video ended. I sat in my apartment, staring at my laptop, realizing I'd been played again. The arrest, the immunity agreement, the trial, it was all theater. Amanda and David had orchestrated everything, including their own arrests, to achieve some larger goal. And I was the pawn being moved across their chessboard. 3 days later, court reconvened. The forensic analysis of the digital evidence had been completed by an independent expert hired by the judge. Your Honor, the expert testified, Ms. Sterling's concerns are valid. Approximately 40% of the digital evidence in this case shows signs of manipulation. Emails have been backdated, metadata has been altered, and several key documents were created months after their purported dates. The prosecutor looked stunned. Your Honor, we received this evidence from the FDA, the DEA, and the pharmaceutical company's own servers. If it's been manipulated, we had no knowledge of it. The judge turned to me. Ms. Sterling, do you have any evidence of who might have manipulated these documents? I pulled out my phone and played the video of Amanda and David discussing the case. Your Honor, I believe this entire case is part of a larger conspiracy. Amanda Cross and David Kim orchestrated their arrests and trials to create the appearance that their network had been dismantled. But they're still operating, and they've been manipulating this trial from the beginning. Agent Morrison stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, I need to request an immediate recess. This video contains new evidence that requires investigation. But before the judge could respond, the courtroom doors burst open. Federal marshals rushed in, followed by agents from multiple agencies. Judge Patricia Williams, you're under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice and accepting bribes. The courtroom erupted in chaos. The judge, the person I'd trusted to oversee fair proceedings, was being arrested in the middle of the trial. As marshals led her away, I realized the corruption went even deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just lawyers and FBI agents. It was judges, prosecutors, entire institutions. As the courtroom cleared, Agent Morrison approached me. We need to talk. Privately. We went to a conference room in the courthouse. Morrison looked exhausted. Judge Williams has been on Amanda's payroll for 6 years. She's been ruling in favor of network members, throwing cases, manipulating outcomes. The video you received triggered a parallel investigation we've been running. So what happens to the Blackwood trial? New judge, new trial, starting from scratch. But Victoria, there's something else you need to know. She pulled out a file and handed it to me. Inside was a photo of me meeting with Dr. Blackwood. But I was in the photo too, a second version of me meeting with him at a different time. That's not me, I said, staring at the image. We know. Someone's been impersonating you. Meeting with clients, signing documents, conducting negotiations. They've been using deepfake technology and voice synthesis to create a digital twin of you. Why? Because if they can make it look like you're part of their network, they can control you even more effectively. Every meeting this fake Victoria has, every deal she makes, every crime she commits, it all looks like you did it. I stared at the photo of my doppelganger, realizing that somewhere out there, someone was living my life and using it to commit crimes. How long has this been happening? Morrison's expression was grim. At least 6 months. Maybe longer. We're still investigating. My phone buzzed. Another anonymous email. Hello, Victoria. Or should I say, hello to one of the Victorias. Did you really think you were the only one? I've been borrowing your identity for months, building a parallel career, creating evidence that you're far more corrupt than you could ever imagine. Tomorrow morning, major news outlets will receive documentation of all the crimes you've committed. Bribes, evidence tampering, witness intimidation. Your career ends tomorrow unless you do exactly what I say. Meet me at the location below. Come alone. And Victoria, bring the Blackwood case files with you. All of them. Because whether you win or lose, that trial doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happens next. I looked at Morrison. They want to meet. Tonight. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. But I don't have a choice. Morrison grabbed my arm. Victoria, if you go to this meeting, you might not come back. Let us handle this. I thought about everything that had happened. The blackmail, the corruption, the manipulation. Someone had stolen my identity, my reputation, my entire life. No, I said firmly. This ends tonight. One way or another.